I find it really important to take close care of every patient. The type of people I have are high maintenance, high profile in a good way.
Hello and welcome to Beauty and the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. Now, I have a very special guest today. It's Dr. Marc Mani, who's widely recognized as one of the top plastic surgeons in the U.S. Now, his private practice is located in Beverly Hills, and he has provided services to A-listers and celebrities for decades. Now, Dr. Mani is named one of LA's top plastic surgeons by The Hollywood Reporter, and Gwyneth Paltrow herself featured him on her website called Goop after seeing his exceptionally natural-looking results on her celebrity friends. Now, he's also a frequent contributor to leading plastic surgery journals and textbooks and a sought-after presenter at national academic and professional society conferences where he shares his innovative surgical techniques with his colleagues. Now, Dr. Mani is also a talented artist and painter from a very young age, and he donates his time and services to Face Forward International, where he is a co-chair of the Physician Advisory Board. Now, this nonprofit offers free cosmetic surgery to victims of domestic violence, sex trafficking, as well as other crimes. Dr. Mani, welcome to Beauty and the Biz. It is a pleasure to finally have you on.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure and honor.
Sure. So we have to start out with why plastic surgery? How did that get in your consciousness as a kid?
I was, well, as I mentioned to you before this, I grew up in Abilene, Texas, and my father was a surgeon and my mother was an artist. So I guess, it was kind of in my destiny. I never really thought about that as much, but I went to medical school specifically wanting to be a surgeon and specifically a cardiac surgeon, which is not an uncommon thing among facelift surgeons because they're both very demanding, delicate surgeries, fast-paced. And then in medical school, I discovered that plastic surgeons weren't just all about vanity. And I saw my first free fibula transfer, and I saw them connecting the vessels together under a microscope. And I said, wow, that's for me. And I didn't realize it was so technically demanding. And also just being an artist, I've always been able to draw and paint. I never studied art, but my mother and her mother were artists. My daughter is better than any of us, and she's never studied for a minute. And so it's just kind of in your genes. And so that's what I realized, well, I should be doing this. And then cosmetic surgery specifically, is sort of about vanity. I won't, make any mince words about that, but it's more demanding in many, many ways than reconstructive surgery because your margin for error is much smaller, particularly with facial aesthetic surgery.
Then this is really interesting because I have seen you at meetings forever, and usually you're talking about facelift techniques. So I just assumed you were a facial plastic surgeon. Well, you're a board certified plastic surgeon, face and body. Do you still do both, or are you now focused on face only? Where are you at with that?
It's a good question. It's the first facelift I saw as a plastic surgery resident. I knew that's what I wanted to do, and so I trained in a program at Baylor, which is one of the top 3 programs at that time in the 90s, and we did a lot of everything, and we had a lot of independent operating experience. And so I was very confident coming out, but as a resident, they would let me scrub on facelifts, and I went around as much as I could. And I just talked to Ben Talley, who's a friend of mine. He did the same thing as a resident. If you're aggressive and you have the talent, you get exposure early. So it ended up in my aesthetic clinic as a resident. I did 35 facelifts on my own, and I specifically chose an attending who didn't want to come in, so because he had other things to do or whatever. And so I got a lot of independent experience coming right out. And so that's why I got into that. But to answer your question, I do non-facelift work. I was kind of known for noses a lot also, and I love them because they're artistic. But most of the non-facelift work I do is on facelift patients or on relatives of theirs when they come in. I don't really go after them, and I definitely get more facelifts.
And you're happy with that? You don't miss breast dogs and lipo?
Not at all. I don't. I like complicated breast surgery, but you kind of choose your battles, and once you get known for something, you want to perfect it. And I don't want to get bored with facelift surgery, but it's never boring, especially with the endoscopic work that I'm doing, because I'm kind of, expanding into endoscopic facelift work, which has added a whole dimension of excitement and creativity to my practice.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that more. So, how in the world do you go from Abilene, Texas, which is really quiet, I'll say, or used to be, to Beverly Hills? How in the world did you choose Beverly Hills, the mecca of plastic surgery and the most competitive arena
Yeah.
available other than Park Avenue?
Yeah, well, to go back in time, when I was about 12, I asked my father what's the best school in the country, and he said Harvard. And so okay, that's where I want to go. And I went there with my sister when she was interviewing at colleges, and I met the admissions officer, and all he said to my little 12-year-old self was, "Don't get your hopes up."
Oh,
And that's especially true now, where you can, you can't just be an Olympic medalist; you have to be a gold medalist and have straight A's. But I prepared myself. I was a debate champion in high school, and I was valedictorian and high SATs, and so I was pretty confident I was going to get into Harvard, which I shouldn't have been, but I got good feedback from them, and even from the admissions office from before, from people that knew my file. And anyway, that's where I went first, was to Harvard undergraduate, and explored more of a liberal arts background. History of science was my major. And so I was always into the liberal arts, and I was always artistic. And so it wasn't just all about science. And then my father being a surgeon, I knew that was a potential pathway for me, that I might have the aptitude for it. I always like working with my hands, and I have steady hands and fine motor control. So I knew surgery would be appealing, and originally wanted to do cardiac surgery in medical school, like I was saying, and then switched to plastics. And why Beverly Hills? Well, I was confident, and I know it's a competitive place, but it's where sort of the highest art form, plastic surgery, has risen to the highest art, because we do have celebrities and people that are on camera, and I think take a particularly fastidious attitude towards the detail here. And so that's why I chose Beverly Hills, and just was very happy here, and so have been very grateful to have a successful facelift practice.
so when you first started out, did you rent a spot in someone else's practice? Did you go all out and do a build
Yeah,
out? How did you
yeah.
enter the marketplace?
Yeah, so it's funny, because I had a girlfriend who I was going to go up to San Francisco with, and she was training at Stanford, and we'd been dating for a while, and I had interviewed. I really wanted to go to LA, and so I had interviewed with a couple people, and Neil Handel was one of them. Neil's a very well-known surgeon here, just a solid individual, also Ivy League educated, so we have that in common when I interviewed with him. But he never wrote me back, and so I was prepared to go up to the Bay Area and join a great practice there, and buy that practice eventually, once I could afford it. And then I had the contract in my hands, and was about to put it in my mailbox, and I opened my inbox, and there was a letter from Neil Handel, finally, after 3 months, that he wanted me to join him, or he was considering still. So it was one of those magical moments where there's kind of a synchronicity, where your life just changed, on a dime. And so I came out. Now, I joined him. I just shared office space with him. And so I wasn't like fed patients. I would take care of his patients while he was out of town, and obviously scrub with him before I got busy. But I got busy fairly quickly. And a lot of it was just because it gave me confidence having a place to land, having an office. And then he operated with me, and he saw that I had the skills and whatever. And he knew that I was an artist, and he knew I would do well. But at the same time, it's not easy starting a practice here. So that gave me a lot of confidence. And, Neil and I, unlike a lot of situations where a surgeon joins an older surgeon, they end up being bitter enemies because there's some financial dispute or something. Neil is my best friend. He's come to my side in the most difficult of times, and I'd like to think vice versa. And I love Neil, and he's really a great friend still after 25 years. So I was very lucky.
That's so unusual. You're right. Most go sideways, and it gets ugly, and that's too bad.
Yeah.
But did he teach you the business and marketing side, or did you learn that elsewhere?
Well, neither one of us, I think, would say that we like the idea of marketing. I've never advertised. I don't like the word marketing, period. I really don't. I think that your best brand is you as a human being, and who you are. It's a person, not a brand, especially in a humanistic field like plastic surgery. So that's the way I've looked at it, and I think he's the same way. Now, that's not to say that both of us together and me separately didn't have our media experience. in the first year or two out. That was one of my goals here too, because like a lot of people here, I wanted to be well known, and I wanted to be. I was a good public speaker. I was a good public speaker, not as good as I used to be in high school, but I always had that as part of my ambition to educate and to be in the media. And so I was on Dr. Phil within, a year of being, less than a year of being in practice, and just by happenstance, meeting producers out at events and things. And I pursued that. And then I got chosen by the New York Times television division to have a reality show called Plastic Surgery Beverly Hills. And Neil and I were on that reality show. And it was very well done. It was, during the era of plastic surgery, like Dr. 90210, they all kind of came out at the same time. Ours aired overseas more for years, and so I got a lot of international patients. But it was kind of lucky that it didn't really take off, because when you have like a reality show practice and the reality show goes, number one, you're going to have patients from Sweden and Saudi and wherever coming in, and you may do beautiful work on them, and they may try to refer their friends, but their friend's not going to come to you just because they saw you on a TV show, So it's much better to have an organic referral-based practice, which is what I've had for a long time now. So the best marketing is to do the best work you can, and realize that your relationships with your patients are the most important. And that's the way I feel about it now. That's the best way to do it.
But when you're starting out, you need patience. So do you remember how you did it? Where did you go on speaking,
Not
speaking
really.
at women's groups or something?
Yeah, I mean, well, Neil did hook me up with some referral sources where like he didn't want to go to this place, and so I
Mhm.
joined this dermatologist who had a lot of male patients, as a gay dermatologist in sort of more east of Beverly Hills, and I just went, and there was a lot of patients there, and I took good care of them, and they were very happy. So that became sort of a baseline. But and then also, I think one of the key things I did as a resident, I reserved the URL plasticsurgerybeverlyhills.com,
Nice.
because it's the very beginning of the internet phenomenon. And that helped me a little, just because I had a website back then. And so I got patients from that. And then it just otherwise just socializing, meeting people, and sticking to my guns. I mean, I charged higher fees from the very beginning,
Mm.
and I didn't lower my fees significantly for anyone. And because I was confident, and being an artist, that helped me too. Just putting it out there that I'm an artist, I can draw. I'm not Michelangelo, but I can do it pretty well. And I think I have a good combination of art and technical skill that has served me well. And so I think just doing that helped. But I think it's better to build a practice slowly, because then it's more enduring, and then you just have a better practice. And yeah, you need to pay the bills. I mean, honestly, one of the things I did, like I said, at Baylor, where I trained in Houston, we did a lot of everything. And one of those things was hand surgery. And I was very well trained in hand surgery. So on weekends, I did workman's comp hand surgery, and would go and do, 7 carpal tunnels and a cubital tunnel surgery on a Saturday, and paid the bills a little bit that way. But I did get busy doing aesthetic surgery fairly quickly. I did take call at emergency rooms. Didn't really do that much of it, but enough to where I had a good profile of board cases for the plastic surgery boards. And it just, there's luck involved, and there's just perseverance and confidence and training.
And mindset, because you were willing to charge more. And I always think you should charge more, but you have to back it up with something, because a patient doesn't know why you're charging more, unless some patients just go on price, but both ways. They either go at the cheapest or the most expensive because it's,
Yeah.
it's perception. But usually though, when you're paying more for something, you want to get more out of it. Did you find that? Like, did you perfect your customer service, or do you think your results were way better and you could prove that to the patients? Like, how did
Yeah,
you?
yeah. No, it's not about customer service. It's about results. I mean, that's the way it should be. And I'm not going to go charging, $200,000 for a facelift and tell patients I'm going to hold their hand and the result's going to be the same. That's not acceptable. You have to perfect your results. But I was confident. Like I said, I was confident coming out, and I would stand by a lot of my early results now. And it is partly about your relationship with the patient, but I tell people that, plastic surgery is not a commodity. There's different levels of quality, especially with facelift surgery. And the attention to detail with regard to the overall gestalt of the lift, and the detail that you can see in the incisions, is something I still harp on in lectures. It's like, why are you hurrying to make this curve here? You need to take your time and make it a perfect curve. You need to follow the tragal crest, but you need to also make a little back cut right up above it, like Tim Martin does, and then go a little bit forward in here. And then you need to free up the earlobe and go right back around the earlobe instead of leaving it attached like that. There are little tricks that I've learned that work well. And but yeah, I mean, it's a good question starting out. I mean, honestly, another thing that happened for me is that, you do celebrities here and there, and I there's a surgeon named Brian Novak that a lot of people have heard about, who was the first to charge very high fees 25 years ago. He was, from by reports, above $100,000, and he backed it up. Brian does beautiful work, and he probably wouldn't even want me talking about him here, but I have a lot of respect for him, and I just ended up having someone that used to work for him, when she left, came to help me, and she said, you got to raise your prices even higher, and you end up selecting out for patients that don't ask about the price. And so, and as far as celebrities, I did get, I think there's a tendency in New York to chase extreme amounts of income, and they do 300 facelifts a year and charge $100,000 to $200,000 for each one of them. That's great. I think they're influenced by the bankers there, and everything is fast there, and some of them do beautiful work. Here, there's a tendency to want to operate on celebrities, and I sort of had a kind of come to Jesus moment years ago, where I just said, who am I if that's all I want to do? And so I just don't care. I want to do the best work I can on every patient. And I've always been about that. There's a pretty well known. I had Whitney Houston came in as a patient, and she failed her medical clearance, and I got a medical clearance on her. And then she unfortunately passed away about 6 months later. I made a big point in TV interviews about that, and I think it was Entertainment Tonight, that you can't cut corners, you can't change your routine just because you're operating on a celebrity. And they have to do what you say. And but a lot of us talk about this. A lot of surgeons here talk about this in LA. You don't want to crave and be thirsty to operate on celebrities. And you don't even want that many. The ones that I have are usually can afford it. There's not that many people that just because they're famous, they can't come in and drop the amount of money that we charge for a facelift. But we always say that you're better off if you have this kind of elite practice, that rather than having a lot of celebrities, you want to have the person who has a private jet and a big mouth, because then they'll refer their 10 friends and they all come in. And like, there's one of the big country clubs in the desert that they all come to me. And, I had a significant Palisades practice, and that slowed down obviously because of the fires, but we're still taking care of them, and they're fortunate to be able to, still to get by. Unfortunately, a lot of people weren't in other areas, but that's kind of what it's about, is delivering the best care you can for all the patients.
That's a good point. The LA fires, they were such a big deal. How much did that affect your practice?
It did affect it. I mean, we had, probably 10, 12 different patients who were booked or are booking, and they had to delay their surgery. Most of them have still come back around. They just need to get settled and get a new place. But yeah, it was, I live up high on the hill in Beverly Hills, and I watched the fires come closer and closer to the 405. And I'm a pretty mellow guy, but that was kind of a nail biter. And, I don't think it should have been as bad as it was. I think that it could have been better prevented.
So were you affected, smoke damage or any of that?
No. I'm in Beverly Hills, so we were far away.
Oh, you're okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, we were miles away, but we were in a warning zone, like almost evacuating kind of zone. Yeah.
Well, why are there so many bad facelifts in Beverly Hills and so many distorted faces?
Well, I don't know if it's fair to say there's so many in Beverly Hills. There's a lot everywhere. I mean, I could look in New York and see a lot of bad ones, and and I think that a lot of it is filler. I think a lot of I think most board certified plastic surgeons aren't going to do a bad facelift. They're, if anything, maybe underdo it a little bit. And I think but I do think a lot of it is filler. I'm not a big fan of hyaluronic acid filler, and I don't make any bones about that. I think it can be done in moderation, but there's studies coming out that show that it lasts. I have a kind of a half joke that in 800 years in Los Angeles, they're not going to find concrete or steel. They're going to find hyaluronic acid filler, and I won't name any brand names, but you know what they are. And I think the companies and the injectors are fortunately starting to realize that. But I do think that a lot of the botched look that you see is
Yeah.
overdone filler, the lips and whatnot. I think most surgeons that are successful doing facelifts, particularly in Beverly Hills, do a pretty damn good facelift.
Yeah. I know I've been down that filler road like everybody else, and it starts out to be a great thing. I started when it was collagen, and it only lasted 3 months, and then it got a lot better. The technology changed, and then they just kept filling, and it was just you looked
Yeah.
insane. Yeah, I mean, I can't. I look at back at photos of myself and cringe with all that filler, and then I
Yeah.
say, you know what, stop with the filler, just take it out completely. And then I remember Dr. McCullough from Alabama.
Yeah,
He
sure.
would, isn't he amazing? He would be at the
Yeah.
meetings and he'd say, no filler, no filler Botox here. And I thought, really? You're just doing that with surgery? And that was such a mind bender for me. I thought, oh,
Mhm.
okay, forget the filler. Let's just.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the deep plane or composite plane lift volumizes the face. If
Mm,
you're getting into that tissue plane, you lift it up. And my friend Dominic Bray in the
mm,
UK and Ritu Chopra recently at Cedars, we were
mm,
lecturing together. They both have posted this video of astronauts or trainee astronauts, training for G forces, and their face goes down, and they look like a 60, 70-year-old, and they're 23 years old. And
mm.
that tells you the volume is still there, it just goes down. So the idea that volume loss is a more important component of facial aging is a fallacy perpetrated by people who pay their boat slip fee by injecting people with filler.
Well, it's a huge market. Yeah,
That doesn't make it aesthetically right.
right.
Yeah.
So, can you just describe your practice? Is it a big bustling kind of practice? Is it a boutique practice?
Yeah, it's a boutique practice. I find it really important to take close care of every patient. The type of people I have are high maintenance, high profile in a good way. They're discreet, and so yeah, I need to be there for them. I see them back several times in the first 2 weeks. We have a well-oiled machine of people coming in, and we get all their appointments set up in advance. I do all the filler dissolving on patients. I dissolve all the filler I can prior to operating on them because I think it's a disservice not to get rid of as much filler as you can. I use an ultrasound. I call it the filler killer. And I can see the little pockets of filler, just train myself to hold the probe with one hand and the needle with the other hand and watch it go away. And it's definitely critical to do it with an ultrasound. Otherwise, you're not going to get it all. And we started getting MRIs. Kami Parsa is a good friend of mine, and he
Mm,
has started ordering MRIs. And he actually ordered one on a patient we shared. And I dissolved all the filler here, and the MRI showed filler all around here. And how
mhm,
much filler had she had here? None, ever. It just
mm.
all migrated out. And so I like to do that first. But that allows me to get a relationship with the patient also because I am dissolving filler on them and they're awake. I get to know them. We get to talk about things. So it is very much a boutique practice, and I
Nice.
love it.
Hello there. Quick pause to ask you if you have gaps in your practice draining your time, profits, and peace of mind. If so, I can help you streamline, grow, and take the guesswork out of your practice. Book your practice growth strategy review at catherinemaley.com and let's turn those gaps into growth. Now, back to the podcast. Are you the only revenue generator, or do you have staff also doing non-surgical
Yeah,
procedures?
I have a nurse, Karen Villanueva, who works for me, and she is one of the trainers for Softwave, and
Yeah.
also has a relationship with some other companies that she's extremely knowledgeable. And she worked for me several years ago, and then went to work at a big dermatology practice for a while. And she came back with a lot of knowledge and skill that
Nice.
she had it before, but now she's like next level. So that part has been busy. It's not anything I really like. I don't want, obviously, from what I've said so far, you can guess I don't want to have a filler nurse in my practice. And actually for the injectors, it's a plus for me because some of them get pissed off at me for being so vocal about filler. But at the same time, I'm not going to do filler. So if someone wants filler and has no fat in their body for fat transfer, I'm going to be the one to refer them out to another injector, as opposed to a lot of surgeons who do filler in their own office. But I don't really see it as, I like it as ancillary procedures for my facelift patients, especially soft wave. It's been very busy. We've had a lot of celebrities coming in for that just because of my nurse being popular. And I like it to maintain results and to, even pre-op for endoscopic facelift work. Sometimes they get soft wave first to tighten up the skin a little bit, and then I go in for the deeper tissues.
I've just been around too long for this skin tightening. Nothing has ever worked well as far as I saw, but I've heard great things about soft wave. Um, I don't know. I
Yeah.
just in today's world, people want it so instantly. They want their results. And in the old days, you would get thermage and it was super painful. And so was the other one,
Hmm.
L-therapy,
Althera,
super
yeah,
painful. And yeah,
yeah,
right, L-therapy. And then they would say, okay, you'll see results in 3 to 6 months. And I thought, this is
yeah.
insane. This is just,
Yeah, that they like to tell you you're going to when that means when that way when you see it at 2 months, what happened? There's nothing. Oh no, wait 4 more months, and by that
right.
time you disappear and you've had a facelift. No, I know there's a lot of kind of bullshit there. I don't think Softwave has impressed me, but yeah, it's I always tell patients, look, the less invasive, the less I can guarantee a result, and I can never guarantee that you're going to be happy even with surgery. But no, I agree with you, and it's individual dependent. It depends upon your skin and your protoplasm. Some people respond very well, and some people don't. And the proportion of people that respond to less invasive things is going to be lower. And the catch-22 is that they're going to work better at a younger age, but you don't need as much of a change at a younger age. So I agree with you. You can't overcall what you're going to get from all those things.
Well, I do like the idea of after you've had a facelift, 3 to 5 years later, you want a pick me up or whatever the heck you want to call that. Maybe that's where Softwave would fit in. I'm just always trying to position that thing, but
Yeah, no, I mean, Softwave, let me tell you, it works for 39-year-olds, 55-year-olds. It
hmm,
works somewhat, but I think in the older age group, you're right. It's more of a pick me up. It's more of a maintenance thing, and a facelift addresses the deeper tissues. A therapy was supposed to, and I think does address, shrink the deeper tissues a little bit, but at the cost of potentially maybe having more fat loss in some patients that are bitterly unhappy. And we don't really say that with Softwave because it's not as deep, but our patients are very happy with Softwave, and you can tell. And I'm not whatever they call it, KOL for that or anyone. I don't like that idea, but I do like it so far and been very impressed by it. But I'm more impressed by facelifts, obviously.
you talking about procedures, we're going to jump over to marketing for a second because I normally would ask now, how do you differentiate yourself? And two huge things you did was the Scarless deep plane facelift as well as mist. So those kind of go hand in hand with the procedures you do like. So can you explain those?
Yeah, I mean, first, the mist is something that I had a patient that was a girlfriend of a friend of mine, and he said, "Can you do anything about her acne scarring?" And I was like, "Well, I'm a plastic surgeon, so probably not, but I'll look." And then I started doing research about nanofat, and that was, Patrick Ternard and Alex Verpali in Belgium had started doing it in maybe 2012 and published it later and or around that time. The problem is that nanofat isn't fat transfer. And even today, I talked to a very well-known plastic surgeon, and he said, well, you want some volume here, just do nanofat. Nanofat doesn't give you volume. Nanofat is just a stromal vascular fraction sort of cells that come from fat cells. But you've, by definition, emulsified out all the fat cells. You've ruptured all the fat cells. So there's growth factors, parasites, macrophages, exosomes that are autologous that come from the patient's own body that I inject, tangentially with a 27 gauge needle very liberally from head, we call it face, neck, and décolletage. We usually do. And so I'll take 40 cc's of fat and process it into, nanofat and inject it, in that way. And it's changed, I was frustrated because lifting the face, you're not stretching the skin, especially with a deep plane lift. If you stretch the skin with a bilamellar lift, it's just going to look worse and it's going to thin out. So just doing the nanofat, I use Potenza first. I use RF microneedling the day before typically, and that primes the skin with microinjuries because the stem cells respond to microinjuries. And then I inject the stem cells just for the skin rejuvenation. It changes the skin in a way that's regenerative and permanent, where like fractional lasers, CO2, whatever, those give you like a boost and psychologically as you see your skin tighten and smooth out, but they thin your skin out. And like I have a patient I operated on recently who's a very prominent wealthy lady who her skin is just pale as a ghost, and because of all the CO2 lasers she's had, and she
Mm.
plays golf in hot climates, and so I'm hoping that by doing nanofat and very optimistic that it will return some blood supply and a little pigment to her skin because it does a lot of different things, fine lines it helps with. But yeah, I got known for that partly because I came up with the acronym MIST, which is minimally invasive stromal vascular transfer,
Mm.
and trademarked that. And, I'm a surgeon, so it's not like I love putting needles in people's faces all the time, but I love it because of the results. And I love it as a kind of icing on the cake to facelift surgery.
Got it. So you're not promoting it as a service, as a procedure on its own, a standalone. It is part of your facelift protocol.
Yes and no. No, we do it on its own. I mean, that's what I just got done doing, why I was almost late. And I do it with fat transfer in the office on Fridays. And so I do like that. If someone's not quite ready to have a facelift, they come to me for that. A good proportion of the time, if they're a candidate for a facelift, they'll still want to do that. But yeah, I mostly love it as an ancillary procedure to facelift surgery.
And then what about at the meetings now? There's always this huge debate about D-plane versus SMAS. And
No,
I know you're
yeah.
on the D-plane bandwagon, but what's a Scarless D-plane? I can't imagine how that
Yeah,
would.
so I wrote one of the seminal articles in 2016 in Aesthetic Surgery Journal that based on the anatomy of the SMAS in the midface, which is basically minimally or non-existent, that a deep plane approach made more sense because when you're separating the skin from here and then you're lifting the SMAS, if there's no SMAS here, you're really not going to have any effect on the midface. So I called it a cantilever effect, where if you leave the SMAS and the skin attached, just out here lateral to zygomaticus major where there still is SMAS, then you're going to have more of a mid-face volumizing effect.
Hmm.
And that's borne out to be true. Now they call it the preservation technique.
Right.
I published that in 2016. It's basically the same thing I've been doing for a long time. But that was the result of me going through a journey of doing bilamellar work and, following the canal approach and where you have two layers. And I just found it wasn't working as well. And you'd have to rely on fat transfer too much in here. Now, I will tell you the next step though, because still with even a composite plane or deep plane facelift, if you're trying to lift the midface from out here, you're not really going to get enough of a vertical vector. So you either have to extend your incision up here, like a lot of the facial plastic surgeons do, or you can do a temporal tunnel, which is coming in from here and going under the frontal branch into the midface. And that's something that I've started doing, and it's a game changer as far as being able to get the right vector in the midface. And using some cable sutures or an endotine ribbon, you can suspend it. You can calibrate the amount of suspension. You can elevate the lateral canthus a little bit because that does go down a little as we age, and do endoscopic canthopexy work. But that's that's the next step. So, as you can tell, I mean, I don't like to be dogmatic about anything. I know that there are surgeons that have had great success doing smastectomies, and I think part of it is about the art of getting the gestalt right. Like Dan Baker and then his sort of protege Steve Levine have done very well with that, but that's because they get the details right. But I do think that if you look at results from smastectomies, most of the time there's not enough of a midface effect. Some people aren't looking for that, but I personally, the neck is important. I find the neck much easier than the midface, though, and the midface is what you focus on when you're talking to someone. So as long as it looks natural, I think that's the better way to go.
You just have so many nuances to the surgical techniques. I've heard them numerous times when you speak. How do you try to explain that to a patient, like why you're different, or do you just say, here are my results, don't worry about how I got there?
No, I try to explain, and I'll
Okay.
keep explaining unless they say I don't want to hear about that,
Yeah.
and that's fine. I won't. But I think we have intelligent people coming in, and a lot of them,
Yeah.
a lot of my patients, because they're for whatever reason, they're discerning about results, so they're willing to come in for a consult, even though they know what's entailed financially and everything else. They also understand the anatomy a little bit more than some doctors do. And you don't want to get too crazy with people that know a little too much, because then they're going to try to second guess everything. But I do explain it until they stop me, because I love doing it and I love talking about it, as you have seen, in some of
Yeah.
those talks.
Well, especially face though, women will research that a lot longer than just a breast aug. Like there's a lot to someone's face, and
Yeah.
they do. I would imagine they come in a lot more educated. It's just trying to explain to them why you're different. I just think that's really difficult to do. You know.
Right, right. Well, I mean, for me, it's obviously the endoscopic work has
Right.
enhanced my knowledge of anatomy. And, I worked with Brian Mendelsohn a year ago or
Right.
so in Melbourne, and he was impressed. And just he's referred me several patients because he's retired now, and that's humbling, to have that happen. And just the endoscopic work has been a way not only of doing the work better in younger patients, and not leaving a scar here, but also seeing the nerve anatomy in a way that we haven't seen it before. So I've been to 15 or more countries in the past 3 years lecturing. I'm going to be one of the two American surgeons at the British Aesthetic meeting in October. And but you pointed out earlier that you've seen me more at facial plastics meetings and
Yeah.
thought I was a facial plastic surgeon. Well, that's partly because the endoscopic work is something that they're maybe more interested in because they get the anatomy better because they've done parotidectomies and they've also got endoscopic skills. So they kind of adopted me. And Ben Tele and Babak Azizadeh and also Guy
Mhm.
Masry is an oculoplastic surgeon really were very generous inviting me to speak, and we love each other. We get along very well. There's just wonderful people. Where the plastic surgery community, which I am part of, is much more hierarchical and a little more, high strung or whatever the word is. But it's changing. And Kia Movasagi in Eugene, Oregon, is the outgoing president and a wonderful guy. And he wants to inculcate some of the facial plastics principles in some of the surgeons and sort of build the aesthetic society based on quality rather than politics, which I respect a lot.
I've said for years, if you surgeons would not implode and work together, you have much bigger common enemies than each other. It would make
Yeah,
more sense to bond.
Yeah, I think I still remember, I think it was Mary McGrath when I was a resident came to
Mm,
lecture at Baylor, and she made that exact point. She said, dermatologists
mm.
fought this battle by training them more. They just went strength in numbers, and look what happened. Everybody's getting filler now and lasers. And so plastic surgeons, there's not necessarily room to train more and more, but at least to work together better and to share ideas for the benefit of patients. And so that's what I decided. I was doing this endoscopic work and it's unique. And I think, I was cited in the PRS journal, which is the highest end of, academic plastic surgery, as the first surgeon to perform a full deep plane on block facelift without a scar in front of the ear. And but full credit to Chachi Keo, who's a colleague of mine, who was really doing this type of work, and he was perfecting what Nicanor Issei did originally back in the early 2000s and even 90s, doing endoscopic deep plane dissection. I think my contribution was to be to connect everything through as an on-block flap, all the way from the forehead over the malar arch to the midline of the neck, and that gives you a more beautiful, smooth, contoured result. And you just have to choose the patients right so they don't have too much excess skin. And it works on a wide variety of people very well.
You had mentioned traveling to other countries. A lot of surgeons will call me and say, I have an opportunity to, Dubai is the big one. They'll say, I have an opportunity to operate in Dubai. Should I or shouldn't I? Do you have any pros and cons for that? Taken away from your own practice?
Yeah,
How do you
yeah,
feel about
I
that?
have cons mostly. I mean,
Okay.
I love to travel. So
Yeah.
that's the reason I started to do it. And honestly, Jason Diamond, who is an amazing guy, he's a great guy, great surgeon, is the one that sort of invited me. He said, I've got this thing in Dubai, you want to go? And I'm like, if Jason's involved, I'm happy to, as a person, I'd be happy to be associated with. I love Jason. And so that's when it started out. I was sort of the victim of my own success there because, like I said earlier, I operate very methodically here, one facelift a day. I take a good day, amount of time to do it right. In Dubai, I wasn't really doing as many facelifts and didn't want to, but I did a lot of noses and I did sort of a high volume practice there. And I had a low complication rate. So I just built a very, very busy practice there. I was probably the busiest plastic surgeon in Dubai, only going there 6 weeks out of the year. And so I love to travel and but eventually it wasn't so much that I was gone from here that much. It was the perception that I was gone from here a lot. And I'm the same way. If I want to refer someone to an internist, well, that person's always traveling. I don't know. So that's what brought me back here. And so I'm glad I did it, but I'm fairly cautious when I give advice to other surgeons about whether to do it because especially facelift surgery is not really something that's done well in an itinerant fashion. You have to be here for your patients and you have to make them come to you.
So would you advise a younger surgeon who's thinking about doing it? Would you say, go ahead and give it a try, but don't do it too long?
Yeah, I don't think like when someone says don't do this, don't do that, you kind of have to consider the source. I'm not, if someone wants to do something, I'll just tell this was my experience, this is what I would avoid. If you
Yeah.
have a good gig set up there and you have a good clinic and you want to do it, and you can set it up right and make the financial side work out, then fine, go for it. But I think there's a little bit of an kind of a mirage um, you know, pun intended, that in the desert that is a little bit of a illusory draw there. That if the best patients are able to come here, and so make them come here. It's better and safer.
My overall, after working with surgeons on that topic for probably, I don't know, 2 decades now, I would say if you're dying to travel and just get away and just break up the monotony, sure, but temporarily, not enough for it to hurt your practice. Because I do think it hurts the practice. You're not in the game as well. You're not as focused. And I think the jet lag's got to kill you. No?
Yeah, the jet lag. I look from training. They say in residency, the only bad thing about being on call every other night is you miss half the good cases. And so, I enjoy my sleep, but you can wake me up at 3 in the morning and I can operate, and I love to operate. I don't care. I'm on it. I love it. It's natural and easy for me. And so that's kind of was a problem, because I could go to Dubai and 16-hour flight and land, and I would tell them, get the patient ready, and I'll go for surgery as soon as I land. Because that kind of keeps you going, and but yes, I agree, Catherine. I think it's not ideal. It can take you away from your practice. It doesn't often work out. I mean, it's one thing, just move to Dubai then and have your full practice there, and enjoy that. But I would not want to do that again.
Regarding, I mean, you are getting older. Do you have an exit strategy, or do you have any other business interests that are keeping you in the game, or what's your game plan?
Yeah. I mean, I could probably retire. I've been fine. I wouldn't want to. I love operating. Operating is kind of a spiritual thing for me. It's a communion with the biologic protoplasm that a non-surgeon would never understand, and a lot of surgeons don't think about it either. But to me, it's a meditation. It's a spiritual experience to have the privilege of operating on someone, especially the face, especially someone who's known for their face, but anyone, that to be able to do that. It's the human face is the touchstone of human harmony and cooperation, and just operating on faces, it's kind of absorbs as has into my soul, and it's part of me now. So, but that's not to say that I don't have other interests. I have, I write. I'm still working on a book that I came out with that has to do with science and spirituality, based on an epiphany I had as an undergraduate at Harvard studying history and science, where I realized that there's something about the nature of time and space as revealed by relativity theory and quantum theory, that's reality is not quite what we thought it was. And I had these thoughts before a lot of people were thinking about it. In fact, it was my new friend Deepak Chopra. I met him, and he's, we've talked about these things. A wonderful, obviously, doctor who understands quantum physics.
How
And
old is he now?
he looks young, and he is a very youthful. He's kind of timeless, but I don't know how old he is. He's probably 70s, maybe something
He
like
has
that.
to be in his later 70s. He's been around
Probably.
forever.
He's been around for a while, but he's been very prolific. He's been one of the few
Hmm.
people that actually made quite a good living writing books,
Yeah.
and they're worth reading. It's hard to do now, but yeah, I'm a deep thinker, and I think
Mm.
about those things. So I have a lot in my coming out with that, where I have a book that's going to be called The Creator Effect, which is a play on the
Mm.
quantum observer effect, and it ties into the way I look at surgery, because I think one of the things about Western science, knowing the history of science as I learned at Harvard, it made some wrong turns, where now our view of the universe is based on the inanimate world. It's based on, the Big Bang and molecules, or, atoms clashing together randomly in a world that's governed by entropy, and that somehow life just happened to happen by accident. Well, that's just total bullshit. There's no way that that's true, and it's actually mathematically disprovable. And I think that being able to see the living protoplasm as we do as surgeons, there's something different between animate matter and inanimate matter, in such a way that that when the idea of vitalism was abandoned by science, the idea being that living matter has a unique quality called the élan vital, it was abandoned in the 1800s, basically because there was one experiment that synthesized organic matter from inorganic molecules. The problem with that argument is that didn't happen randomly. It happened because a scientist did it in the lab. And so there's a lot of holes in the current paradigm of science anyway. And so that ties into my book, just appreciating the fact that living things have a special quality. They don't really obey the laws of physics as we see them. They're anti-entropic. Living matter organisms don't follow the law of entropy. I mean, we eventually die, but we also reproduce, and life carries on. So that leads to higher order, and that's very anti-entropic. And I can go off on these tangents for a while, but I don't think I think they're important things to think about. And then my other business interest is also something that came about, which is I invented a travel pillow, or it's a recovery pillow. And I was actually at the county hospital in Houston, on a post call after doing like 3 thoracotomies in the emergency room one night. I was exhausted, and I couldn't drive home. I was too tired. So I sat down in a plastic waiting room chair and found a cervical collar and put it on, and I fell asleep for like 3 hours. And I woke up and I said, there's got to be a way to design a pillow that will let you sleep in an upright position that's better than these crappy ones they have now. And so I had some time that during a little sabbatical that I had the privilege of taking a few years ago, where I just had time to start carving foam and came up with this. And now I have, I think, 4 domestic and 2 international patents on it.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, and I was persuaded to call it the Mani. It's called the Mani Flow. But it also fits in this travel case, which is maybe smaller than my head. I don't know. My head's pretty big. But anyway, then I hear I'm in my office, and I'm kind of tired because I operated all day, and I will take a nap in my chair, and I could sleep right now. And I use it I take red eyes when I go on these lecture trips, and yeah. So anyway, people always ask when it's available. We have several thousand coming now on a boat that have been made, and we're meeting with a marketing team tomorrow, and so it'll be available fairly soon. We're going to have a website built and sell it. So that's another thing that I feel confident is going to do very well. But I want to do it.
Are you going to go down the Amazon road, or do you have a better way to sell it?
You kind of have to.
Yeah.
And the reason is that I'm just talking to marketing publicity people. One of the reasons you have to do Amazon for obviously it's a mark of success of a business and presence and credibility in theory, but also when you publicize something in the media company, the writer or the whatever it is, the company, they get when they get a link, when a reader follows your link to buy the product, if it's through Amazon, they get a commission on the entire shopping cart, not just your product. So if someone has a shopping cart with other things in it, they'll get multiple times more commission if your link is an Amazon link. It's kind of a little thing that I have a good friend who's become an advisor, who's a very successful entrepreneur in the peptide supplement space. And that's who I learned it from, was her people that worked for her.
Are you getting into that market as well?
Peptides and supplements? No, I don't want to do that. But I think I do. Skincare. I have people that have approached me to do, and I would do it right. I haven't done it because it's a saturated market, and I don't want to do something just for the money. I want to do something that works. This works. This is revolutionary, and it will change the way people travel. It will change. People get their neck feels better. People with neck problems. Even neurosurgeons have seen it and said that's perfect for my patient as a step down recovering from cervical spine surgery. So there's a big, wide field of changes that I'm happy about, because it's not just something I thought, how can I make money? It's something like, how can I solve a problem that exists? How can I, creatively solve a problem that has never been solved? The need to sleep in an upright position. And so we're going to do studies around it. And there's science behind the idea that when you sleep, when your neck and spine are aligned with the cervical lordosis supported, your blood flow and your airflow is better. And so that's the principle that we're operating on here, because it supports your cervical lordosis with this arch here and keeps you in an anatomically aligned position.
And if you could eliminate the snoring on the plane of the men who fall asleep,
I think we can see that as a target. That might be a good ad. That would be a good ad, like a viral ad on YouTube with someone snoring and the person next to him is kind of elbowing them, like, shut up.
Seriously, I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah, you're ruining my flight.
Yeah. So, you know what? I wanted to, for marketing, I forgot to mention social media. You're doing a heck of a job. You've got almost 300,000 followers. How much time and effort are you putting into that? And is it helping to attract the out of towners, or do you want the out of towners?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Catherine. I appreciate that question. Well, I got those followers organically just because, like, I did a rhinoplasty on a big influencer. She's public about it. She's was quote, the whole magazine story in Harper's Bazaar about it.
Mhm.
Huda Beauty,
Yep.
and it turned out beautifully. I think it helped her career a little bit, and she was very gracious to talk about it. And that's the candid, attitude that can make people successful. I got, probably 50,000 followers from that, and then it just built on that. And but I never really sought it out. I guess the other thing is, I mean, I guess I was kind of known from television way back, and so people know who you are for whatever reason. I've been around for a while. Do I do I put a lot of effort into it? No, I don't. I really don't post enough. I don't really, I have patients that look at it, but my practice is mostly referral based, boutique practice. But at the same time, I have gotten some very good patients from Instagram because, you get back what you put out there. And so people that come to you eventually in a mature practice reflect who you are. And we get some of the most interesting, formidable business people, celebrities that are just wonderful, inspired people that have a humanistic attitude. And they see that. And I think the things I put out there educationally have attracted really great patients. But it's not my main source of surgical candidates because of the referral nature of my practice. I like to educate. I like to use it to educate. I'm putting a little bit more time in it as I can, as much as I can, and I love doing it. And I have great followers. It's not just the numbers, but my followers are very engaged. They ask good questions. I rarely get some troll that better before or whatever that kind of, which I like to think is because I'm going to post results that are impressive. But also it's just nice to have nice people, following you.
Any secrets for getting them to approve their video with you? Because you're
Yeah.
showing some killer results, but you've got to get these women to say, sure, sure, show me
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. I don't push it. I don't routinely get like, oh, we can get a discount if you do this. Okay, here's how I do it. Okay.
Mhm.
Just so other surgeons this has worked for me. It's usually after the surgery that I'll ask them. And it's just unfortunate because then I haven't made a video before. The most powerful ones are where you make a video before. And the most powerful results, especially that work for me, for my algorithm, are videos. Pictures, like, yeah, okay, but you're not operating on a picture. You're operating on a live human being. So a video tells you a lot more about how their face moves. Does it look natural? Are the expressions preserved? Are they happy? Can you see it in their eyes that they're happy when they're talking? Those are critical things that you get from a video that you don't get from a picture. So anyway, what I do is I don't ask that often, and I know you're saying I post results. I don't have that many results, and people complain about it all the time.
Mm.
But Tim Martin has zero other than what he's
Yeah.
presented, and Steve Levine has no social media, and he's very busy. He's got just a whole word of mouth reputation, which is the best. But I do, so I'll go in if I see someone, I'm like, I really want people to see this result. I'll say, do you mind if I show your pictures to prospective patients in the office in my book? And they'll usually think about it and say, yeah, okay. And then I gauge by how long it takes them to answer that question. If like,
Mm.
oh yeah, no problem. I'll say, well, how about, would you mind if I put it on social media tastefully and without your name? And that's when, but you have to ask them. But that's how I do that on the rare occasions when I do it.
I think the secret is the doctor has to ask. And they're the one that, you have a
Yes.
relationship with the patient. You'll just get a yes way more often than your staff's going to get.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And look, I mean, look, okay, I'll speak from personal things, and people have heard this before. I had my nose done by a friend, Richard Zumalin, who's a brilliant
Oh, yeah,
rhino,
yeah.
as good as you get. And I
Mhm.
asked him a long time ago if he would do it because I was like, I want my nose like started getting bigger and droopier as I aged. It used to look basically like this when I was in my low 20s.
Mm.
And but Richard eventually he said no, he didn't want to do it on a friend because he doesn't want to look at your result every day when he sees you. And then
Mm.
I asked him again because I had taken some time, a week off, and I wanted to have something done. And so he said yes, and I'm very happy about it. And I talk about it openly. And he just did a beautiful. I did a computer morph of what I wanted him to do, and I think he did better. So I love Richard, and I'm very grateful every day. Um, for
He,
that. And
he
also,
does the best Instagram before and afters I've ever seen. He's
well,
got the
Richard,
music
yeah,
and they're all
yeah,
crying and
he's an artist and he has an artist soul, and so he not only does the visual and the emotions, but the music, and he
yep.
takes time and does that, and it's a joy for him to do it, and you can tell, and he deserves all of his success.
Mm.
And but I've also had a significant amount of hair restoration done because my forehead got bigger in my 20s, and then
Oh,
I'm not really balding. I have a lot of hair, and I don't have any here bald spots,
ah.
but I just wanted my forehead lowered. So I've been to the best people. I've been to Gary Perol in LA, who's
Oh, I
brilliant. I
don't
think
know
he's the
him.
best guy here in town. And then Ron Shapiro in Minneapolis. And then the last one I had do it is named Munib Ahmad in near Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And he's the best. Will stand by this. Munib Ahmad is the best doctor who's ever done hair transplant surgery ever in history.
Wow.
And because I mean, look, you really can't tell. This is
Ah,
1,500 grafts here, and it's
yeah.
dense. And I kind of drew the hairline that I wanted. He drew it, and I said, okay, move it down here a little, and he was like, okay with that. And yeah, he backs it up. He's very expensive, and he's booked for like 2 years. That tells you right there that he's doing something special. So yeah, so I'm very open about that stuff. I think it's important.
Supernatural. I had no idea. Good job.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I mean, it's just one of those things, like,
Yeah.
problem.
We're getting ready to wrap it up. Can you tell us any crazy patient or staff story that you care to share?
Well, there's a couple things. Like I remember one time I was visiting an actress for a home visit after her surgery, and she said, "You're going to go up this stairway," and it was in behind this gated thing. Just go up the stairs, and I went up the stairs, and then I went around, and I ended up in her backyard. And I look, and there she is in the bathroom through this big window, and I was like, "Jesus, I'm going to get shot! Like I'm an intruder here." And so those are things that like have a little bit of a, you got to be careful with in general with the home visits. And again, that's like with what very well known people. There's a a high maintenance side of clearing out the office, and I did a post op on a patient that was filming a movie in Paris, and that was kind of an exotic thing, but it was an interesting little escapade. I think in general terms, I can't name names, but my tech, Molly, stays with our patients after surgery, and she's a force of nature. She doesn't sleep. She's loves what she does, so she'll stay up all night. But she could write a book, and because of the things that she learns from them and actors that have these stories. And you realize that, I mean, I've had associations with celebrities personally, and you kind of realize that they're human beings. And so some of the stuff you hear in the media, like, yeah, this person's really upset about that breakup. I mean, this is not just a bullshit superficial media thing. And so Molly hears all these stories firsthand, and not that she would, but if she were to write a book, she said it would be
Yeah.
called Percocet Promises, because they have a little bit of Percocet on board, and then the truth comes out.
I was going to say,
But
God, they must be telling her that their life story on Percocet. Dear Lord.
sometimes. Molly is just such a wonderful, she obviously doesn't tell anyone about these things, and that's very strict in my practice. Like I've heard, other surgeons talk about their celebrities and the word gets out. And the word for me has gotten out just because the celebrity has told other people, or their hairstylist knows. So they refer people, and then people assume they know this person was operated on by them. But I think it's bad karma. It's illegal, but we take pride in confidentiality. I think that's implicit.
For sure. Last question. Tell us something we don't know about you.
Well, the book is something that people don't know. The book is called The Creator Effect, that's coming out, and I have this intense interest in physics, modern physics, quantum theory, and relativity theory, and about how that relates to human spirituality, and have a whole sort of overarching view that's very positive about the nature of humanity as an evolved phenomenon, sort of. And I think that if Western science has followed this paradigm where they have to bend over backwards to say there's no God, and intelligence is an emergent phenomenon based on neurons forming and the brain forming, and it's kind of farcically, it's an impoverished view of the world. And I'm not a religious person. I grew up in Abilene, Texas, which is very religious, so I kind of reacted against that. But at the same time, I think if you look at the world objectively, if you really went to another planet and then came back to this planet, you would see the beauty of humanity a lot more. I think if like a dog looks at human beings and they see the harmony and the beauty and like the love we have for each other that we don't see because we're caught up in all the toxicity, and especially now. So that's, I think for me, it's I have a very positive worldview. I like to get away from just the superficiality of plastic surgery, aesthetic surgery, which is part of why I do, 10% of my practice is devoted to working on and being the co-chairman of the medical advisory board of Face Forward, which is very dear to my heart. It's 10% of my practice, but a much bigger fraction of my heart. These survivors are just very inspiring, and so we love trying to restore their confidence.
I looked into that. That's transformational, to say the least, and very fulfilling work, I assume.
Yeah, I really want to, encourage more. I mean, I have great, Ash Gabami came to my place for a party, and he's going to get involved. And his partner, Neil Veranis, did a beautiful job with me doing a forehead flap on one of our survivors. And so it's pretty, the thing is, we're trained to do all this reconstructive work, or most of us are, in these big programs, and then you don't do a damn bit of it when you're in practice. So, I haven't gone on missions overseas. A lot of surgeons have done that, which I think is amazing. The nice thing about Face Forward, though, which is what I would encourage other surgeons to get involved with Face Forward specifically, is that they fly the patients here and they give them psychological counseling, and only then are they going to have the surgery. But then they stay, and we operate on them again and again. And so the staff love it, and it's just added a lot of joy to what I can give. That's the best thing about it. Just it makes you see the world differently.
Very, very nice. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure. If anybody wanted to get a hold of you, I know your website is marcmani.com. And so is your Instagram. Is there any other way you like people to talk to you?
Yeah, marcmani.com is my website. My Instagram is at Dr. Marc Mani. And then my email is kind of complicated, but yeah, my Instagram I think Instagram is a good way because that's how I engage with people. So at Dr. Marc Mani is probably the best way.
Okay, Dr. Marc Mani. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble with your last name. It cannot be that difficult. Mani.
You know what? As a marketing person, you'll understand. I don't care what they call me as long as they call me.
And with that, we're going to wrap up Beauty in the Biz for this time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. If you would please leave me a review, that would certainly help me grow our audience. And then if you've got any questions or feedback for me, please leave them on my website at catherinemaley.com. Or you can certainly DM me on Instagram at Catherine Maley MBA, and we will talk again soon. Thanks so much.
The fastest way to success is to model other successful surgeons who have what you want, but you can only see their results, not the path they took to get there. So you continue to jump from one thing to another, hoping to find something that will work for you too. But it rarely does. So try this shortcut instead. It's guaranteed to move you forward. I compiled my intellectual property to grow cosmetic revenues, everything I've gleaned over the years, into one playbook of the most successful practices and what they do to win. Go to cosmeticpracticevault.com and let's grow your cosmetic revenues.